Tales from the Ribble Valley by Cornelius MacManus and George Hull. The Man-Trap. There was a deep shadow in the woods round Waterfield Hall, but a deeper and more deadly shadow once lay across the life of the man who is now its proprietor. The water-carrier's memory required a lot of refreshing before he remembered the beginning and end of the story, and he had to be helped out with the story, not the refreshment, by some of the oldest inhabitants of Ribchester. Once upon a time, these old people are very shaky in the matter of dates. Mr. Wingle's gamekeeper smiled visibly as he left the hall. It was the latter part of the year, and the leaves were falling fast around him, while the early frost had browned the grass through which he walked on his way to his home. It was something wonderful to see a smile upon the features of this stolid old servant. None of the Ribchester people had ever observed such a phenomenon. Indeed, a farm labourer who happened to catch a glimpse of Samwar's countenance at once set out the report that the keeper was going out of his mind and should no longer be trusted with a gun in his hand. All the people of that part believed that Sam Ward was a sullen tyrant. Sam himself had long believed that every male inhabitant of Ribblesdale was a born poacher, and he treated them accordingly. About the time when the cotton famine was laying waste the industries of our country, the game upon Mr. Wingle's estate began to grow less. It disappeared every night. Watchers were set on in vain. Hares and pheasants were taken from under the keeper's eye almost, and this, when the shooting season was at its height, couldn't be tolerated for another day. Sam Ward declared that he had tried every dodge, excepting one, to defeat the designs of the depredators. This one remaining resort was so repugnant to Mr. Wingle's ideas that for a long time he refused to listen to it. He reminded his keeper that man-traps were illegal, and that any person caught in one could sue for heavy damages for his injuries. Sam replied that no man caught in such a manner would dare to make the fact public. He remembered the time when the late Mr. Wingle was alive. They always had a trap set in the lower croft. One night a famous old poacher from Samlesbury fell into it. It wasn't a trap such as Sam wanted to set now. Oh no, it was a real, right-down stunner of a man-trap. It had teeth as sharp as knives, and spikes 3 inches long. Well, this Samlesbury man got into it, and his leg was caught in such a position that he was lame for life. And did he go about complaining of this shocking treatment, and let everyone know he'd been poaching? Oh no, he just hobbled home, told his friends and relations that he'd got a drop too much, that he'd fallen asleep in the road, and that a cart had run over him in the darkness. At length Mr. Wingle agreed that such a contrivance should be placed in the wood near to the hall. It was only a mild-looking machine, compared with the old-fashioned traps, but contemplation of the fate of any man who might drop into it was what caused the keeper to smile as he went home to his tea. 2 men stood at the door of a small house in one of the suburbs of Preston. One was bareheaded, the other had his hat on, and was drawing on his gloves, for the afternoon was cold. "Do you think there is hope, any at all?" asked the first mentioned. As he spoke, his voice was almost choked by anguish and fear, lest the answer should break the thread of hope upon which he had depended. "Well, of course, you're a man, and I don't want to deceive you," said the doctor. "There always is hope as long as there's life. The old proverb is a true one, and cases of this kind sometimes last for years. But if there is anything at all that can be depended upon to prolong her life, it is nourishment and careful nursing. Our only hope now is in those." After the doctor had said these words, he bade the other man good afternoon, as if it were not the worst afternoon he had ever experienced, and went upon his way. The broken-hearted husband swallowed the lump that had been rising in his throat, and returned to the side of the bed, upon which lay the frail form of his dying wife. If her life was to be saved, nourishment was to save it, But where was that nourishment to be procured? Their very subsistence depended upon the labour of the husband's hands, and the scarcity of cotton in the town had stopped the mills and taken the very bread from their mouths. There was one resort still, but Robert Graham shrank from it. Bad as had been his circumstances, and bitter his luck, he had refrained from applying to any of the friends who had known him in his earlier days. He would sooner have died than have accepted from any of them the means to prolong his own life, but his love for the woman whose wasted form lay before him was stronger than his love of life, stronger even than that pride which was the marrow of his bone and the surging life of his blood. "What does the doctor say?" asked the feeble voice from the pillow. "Oh, he says that care and nourishment are all you require now. We shall have you up and well again." "Oh, never, never again," said the wife feebly. "Yes, again and soon. Keep your heart up now, do, for my sake," said the husband in a hollow attempt to hide the despair that wrung his heart. All that night the husband sat by the bedside of his wife, watching her as she lay, wondering whether by some miracle the blush of health would ever return to her sunken cheek, and the blessing of strength to her wasted form. Ever and anon, too, would recur to his mind the words and sentences in a letter which he had written that evening, words he could never have humbled himself sufficiently to write, had the situation been one of less emergency. In the afternoon of the following day, the husband, with his hat in his hand, stood by his wife's bedside. "You are not going to leave me, are you?" the sufferer asked, lifting her feeble hand as if it still had the power to detain him. "Only for a little time. I shall be back tonight." "Don't go today. Put off until tomorrow. I may be better tomorrow," pleaded the wife. "I have appointed tonight. If I fail to go tonight, it may be worse. For us. She may not care to come another evening, and then where shall we be? But I will put it off if you really wish me to do so." "No, Robert, perhaps you had better go after all. If I am better tomorrow, I shall want you to stay and talk with me. If I am worse, I cannot bear you to leave me." "Don't say worse," said the husband, pressing the wasted hand of his wife. "I cannot bear to think that you will be worse. Besides, the doctor says that with a little nourishment you will improve at once." "Well, go. It is selfish of me to wish to detain you. You are going for my sake. You are always making sacrifices for me." "Not more than you have made for me," said the husband, and as he stooped to kiss the parched lips, a tear fell upon her wasted cheek and told the story he had laboured to suppress. By and by, the only nurse whom the sick woman could afford came creeping slowly in. She was a neighbour, and had volunteered to wait upon the patient in the intervals of her own household duties. She had determined to sit up all this night with her charge, in spite of the protestations of the anxious husband. The latter, poor man, was quite worn out by constant vigils. Only the fear that he might break down at some critical moment, when his services were most required, induced him to consent to the kindly neighbour's proposition. "I won't be long away," said Robert Graham, as he took down his overcoat from a peg behind the door. "I have a little business to transact a few miles out of the town. I am bound to go, or I should not. I will get back as soon as I can." "All right, Mr. Graham. Do come back early, for you need rest. She seems to be a lot better, and we shall be able to spare you for a little sleep tonight." "Do you really think that she is better?" asked the husband with dreadful earnestness as he stood upon the threshold. "Oh, yes, sir. I have my hopes that she is taking a turn for the better now." This neighbour soon afterwards told another neighbour that she never in all her life bit her tongue so hard as when she told that lie to the despairing husband of her rapidly failing patient. Robert Graham saw no sign of friendly deceit on her kindly face. He left his own with a lighter step and walked briskly down the street. The neighbour nurse went back to the sick room. There she threw down the blind and then sat down in the worn armchair that had its permanent place by the bedside. The furniture in the room was scant, a common iron bedstead, a chest of drawers topped by a closed workbox, and a row of medicine bottles. A table with a few devotional books, a daily paper, and a basin upon it. These, with 3 chairs standing on the edge of a strip of worn carpet, comprised the old furniture of the room. It was quite evident that its tenants had not lately been in very good circumstances. An oil lamp stood upon the low mantel-shelf, but the untrimmed wick smoked, and the upper part of the glass chimney was thus rendered black and opaque. The dismal room grew more dismal as the night went on, 1 hour following another into the dreary night. The time passed at which Robert Graham was to return home, but he did not come. 11 o'clock struck from the tower of the town hall, and the sufferer feebly called the name of her absent spouse. "He's no one back yet. He hasn't been gone long. Try and sleep. It'll do you good," said the nurse. Then she arranged the bedclothes more comfortably around the wasted form, and sat down again to endure the appointed vigil. But there was no sleep for the sick woman. Not yet. The half-hour chimed, and the anxious wife grew more restless. The scarcely less anxious neighbour did all in her power to reassure her, but all to no purpose. When the deep tones of midnight sounded over the town, the alarmed nurse saw that a great and fearful change had come over the face of her patient. Oh, that the husband would come! The feeble voice incessantly spoke his name, and the nurse's ears were strained to catch the first sounds of his footsteps in the distance. Still he remained away. There was no response to the cries of the wife, and the persons in the street were all strangers, and passed by with hurried footsteps to their several homes. "Robert, he is waiting for me somewhere. I must go and find him," said the sick woman, and she would have risen from the bed had not the frightened neighbour held her down, and in trembling tones assured her that her husband was coming, and would be presently at the door. "He is calling me," said the sick woman. "I can hear him. He is in distress, and I will go to him." And sitting up in bed, she begged to be allowed to go in search of her absent husband. While this paroxysm was on, however, the poor creature sank exhausted upon the pillow. Still her parted lips breathed the name of the husband who tarried upon his journey, while she seemed fast speeding upon her own, speeding without that tearful farewell that lingers in the memory when the lips that have spoken it are crumbled into dust. It was nearly dawn, and still there was no sign of the missing husband. "Well, have you visited our man-trap this morning, Samuel?" asked Mr. Wingle of his gamekeeper. "I did so last night," said Sam, hobbling up to his master with great difficulty. "Oh, and did you catch anything?" "Yes, I caught a death of cold, and something more." "The deuce!" exclaimed the squire. "Why, whatever's the matter with you, Ward?" "You may well ask, sir, and you may as well tell me." "Well, sir, last night I was so suspicious that one of our oldest poachers would be caught that I really couldn't help waiting about the trap a bit, just for the pleasure of seeing the catch. I had waited till I was nearly tired when I heard a sharp step ahead of me, and I knew that my man, whoever he was coming right into the trap. He strode off towards the hall, and I found out that he went there by Miss Wingle's invitation. The devil he did. Yes, sir. Well, I know she's a soft-hearted piece of business. I'd ask him to dinner if I was her. I'll see to this, Ward." When Mr. Wingle returned to the hall, he met his only daughter, and at once asked her if it was true that she had brought a poacher into the house. "Did you authorize Ward to set a man-trap?" asked the lady sternly. "Yes, I did. We've lost game enough. I was determined to put a stop to it." "Don't you know that such traps are illegal? You have made a sad mistake this time. The man you would have caught is one whom you have wronged before, and now when the law will help him, he will take his revenge upon you." Oh, and what about my revenge upon him? He was stealing my game." "He was not. He is no poacher, and was not in search of game." "Then what on earth did he want there? Tut, tut, He may impose upon you with that tale, but he won't impose on me. He was there at my request. At your request? What do you mean? He wrote to me for relief, and as I didn't want you to see him, I had to arrange to see him at the conservatory door last night. He was coming across to the conservatory when he almost fell into the trap. Who is it that dares to come begging in that clandestine manner? I may as well tell you, it is your own son Robert, whom you sent away from home for marrying beneath him, as you called it. Good God, I thought he was in Australia. He has been back 2 years. He says in his letter to me that he has been cashier at a mill in Preston, but the famine has reduced him to the point of starvation. Is he badly hurt? No, but he was furious against you last night. He said he would set the law against you if it cost him his life. You have disinherited him, and had it not been for his own foresight, your abominable trap would have kept him away from his dying wife. His dying wife? Yes, his dying wife. It was for her, and not for himself, that he wanted help. If it had depended on himself only, he'd have gone to the workhouse before he'd have come here. Why didn't you tell me of all this? Because he enjoined me not to do so. Is he in now? No. Then let him be found. Let him have everything he wants. Let his wife be sent for, if she can be moved. I will see him tomorrow. Aye, today if possible. Back to the sick room again. The doctor and the frenzied husband are bending over the wasted form. Is it too late? Ah, yes. Nay, not so. One feeble movement gives token of the lingering life, and the doctor moistens the pallid lips with a potent draught, which he keeps for such cases. The eyes open. The sight of the lost husband gives them a new light. The angel of death leaves the humble household, and the once despised wife of Robert Wingle lives, first to be welcomed, and afterwards to be mistress at Waterfield Hall.